Live.
Hi.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Jones. I'm with Redefining Your Future, here to host a symposium series with one of our guests, Dave Dittemore. Because we are doing live interviews instead of having our annual symposium, but we can still adapt and overcome, and we're going to have some great conversations with our speakers during this series. So our first, tonight we have Dave Dittemore from the Veterans for Peace. He's the president of the Tacoma chapter of Veterans for Peace, and I've met him a few months ago, joining when I joined the group. And so we're going to have a good conversation and learn a little bit more about the organization and how to get involved in the community, different issues that the organization is involved in, and taking action in the community and in our world. So Dave Dittemore, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'm very much looking forward to it. Answering questions as best I can. Talking about my military experience only about 50 years ago, but what I'm doing now is a civilian, now retired civilian. But
Right.
I've, as Laura said, retained an interest participating in a group called Veterans for Peace. So I am a peacenik, but I do, realize we have a lot of military around in the Tacoma area. I have an interest in PTSD. I was involved in a divorce recovery group that greatly helped me discover who I am and learn how to deal with other people, and kind of transitioned to some other support groups, and had a good friend who was a Marine um, that unfortunately lost to a suicide. So that's how kind of I got interested in trying to transition from divorce to PTSD, and since has become interested in homeless. There's a lot of things that go on with the veterans community, I'm sure you're all aware of.
Oh yes. Yeah, we are. We do some work with the homeless and the homeless women veterans. Our CEO has done a lot of work with that and getting involved in making sure that we get those support the people that need that. So, but yes, there's so, like you said, there's so many different opportunities and organizations and issues that veterans face all the time, every day. So there's always an opportunity to get involved and to continue serving. So we appreciate that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. And you're also an amateur musician, you said? You play French
Oh,
horn?
yeah, I
Awesome.
played French horn in high school and college. And of course, that's one of my trivia questions. I can say I played in the Orange Bowl, but that
Oh,
was
cool.
a halftime ceremony, and marched in the parade. And if I'm sure you've all seen band uniforms, though they're made out of wool. And the Orange Bowl parade was, even though it was in the evening, it was about 80 degrees, so 3 mile hike. Uh, and I'm, like I said, an undernourished hippie. I was soaking wet, but it was great fun. We lost to Penn State, unfortunately. I went to the University of Kansas, but anyway, played music all the way through school. Took 24 years off,
Mm.
but got back involved by in this church. Lady said, "Well, we really need French horn players to this community band back in Wichita, Kansas." And but no, by the way, we're going to France next summer. We played at the Normandy Cemetery.
Oh,
It was the 50th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. So we
wow.
were there on the invasion day, but they had special ceremonies all summer long.
Oh,
So
that's
we played several places and got to tour Mont Saint Michel, this island thing I read about as a little kid. I never dreamed I'd get there. And of course, played in one of the parks in Paris. Um, saw just saw the sights. Music has taken me in several trips
mm.
like that. But I also played in the American Legion Band,
Oh,
and
yeah.
love marching the small town parades in the summertime with the, I mean, it's Americana, the politician throwing candy to the kids and the kids pampering over
Right.
it, and the logging trucks and the fire engines. And
Yeah.
all that kind of good stuff. So I do that and also sing in a choir. But so that's one of my hobbies. Yeah.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah, that's very good to stay active in. And you say you also play taps for veterans
Yeah.
memorial services through Bugles for America. So that's awesome. You're that's good. You're staying active
Uh-huh.
in the
Yeah, it's
community.
called Bugles Across America, and I just ran into another veteran who was telling me about it, so I signed up. And I haven't done a
Cool.
whole lot in the last few years, but to me, it's a way to honor other veterans. And I have
Right.
put out a mount to Houma a couple of times, but it's several cemeteries in mostly Western Washington area.
And that's so important because I know there's a lot of veterans, sometimes that they don't have family, and so that having that support and having that military memorial service is very important.
Yeah,
So that.
anymore, I mean, they do have honor guards, I think, for most of the bases around here, but a lot of times they don't have a person that's able to play the trumpet and play taps. So they have a thing that looks like a mute they stick in the end of a trumpet. And it sounds okay. Most people don't even realize what's going on.
Right.
But I was really very honored a couple of years ago to play at a ceremony in a high school that featured a World War II veteran. And I forget the ship. I call the name of Cincinnati or something like that. It was a cruiser that got torpedoed by the Japanese after the end of the war because people didn't get communications. And I think
Mm,
they sent out an SOS, and I think it was Pearl Harbor or somewhere. Figured, oh, it was all just a joke because the war's over. And so it was a terrible loss. I think a few people survived, but hundreds of
wow.
sailors were lost that day. But I got
Mm,
to play for this school assembly honoring this man. So, yeah, a lot of those have been very special to me.
yeah, that's powerful.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about and learn a little bit more about the Veterans for Peace,
Uh-huh.
and wanted to ask about what inspired you to join the organization, and how did you hear about it?
It's interesting. I was living in Olympia at the time, um, still active in my recovery group and working for the Utilities Commission in West Olympia. And there's a community access channel, and I was, learning how to be a cameraman and some other stuff. And they were looking for, people to help with the production for this group. And I figured, well, oh, what the heck, I'll help out. And so got hooked into the group, and that would have been about 2005, I believe. So I've been
Mm,
involved for about 15 years. And the
oh,
crazy thing is, I do not recall now when the light bulb went off or whatever, but when they started talking about it, invading Iraq,
mm,
this sounds a whole lot like Vietnam. Uh,
mm,
so, like I said, I don't recall any particular event or any particular news thing, but it was something I just was really concerned about it. Of course, I did serve in Vietnam. Can say I was brought up to respect authority figures, and the funny thing was, I was a short guy. I was only 5'6" in high school. I actually grew 4 inches in college, but my parents figured out I wasn't going to be a warrior. So they signed me up in the reserves. And my dad had been in the reserves after World War II. He was a Navy officer teaching sonar out in the Pacific.
oh,
Uh,
wow.
so anyway, I drilled all the way through college. So luckily went in as E4, so I didn't end up painting everything. Uh,
Mm,
Learned how to be a storekeeper. But anyway, did end up going to Vietnam for a year and then on board ship for a year. It was interesting to say the least. Got to go to the World's Fair in
mm,
Japan, and actually ran into a distant cousin aboard the high-speed train from Japan down to
oh, cool.
Tokyo to Osaka. So it had some interesting things going on.
Mm, right, right. So that's awesome, and to have that the reality of what's going on today, and just in our community and in our world, we're staying involved or staying up to speed with the military, what's going on in different parts of the world. I think that's really what kind of inspired me, also to join or to look into Veterans for Peace as well too. One thing that for me was another. I keep in the back of my mind too is that my grandfather was a POW in World War II,
Right.
and he actually befriended one of the Japanese officers,
Mm.
and he was eventually released by this Japanese officer. And so 9 months after he returned to my grandmother, my dad was born. And so just kind of knowing that, my own existence is because of the kindness of an enemy officer, it's really powerful. And I think that's kind of what Veterans for Peace kind of means to me too, is that ending the wars, getting focusing on the peace mission, and making it so that it's more diplomatic for within the country's
Yeah, I think one of
diplomatic
our
process.
goals is to resolve disputes between countries and even between people, but without war and violence. In
Right.
fact, we've changed our mission a little bit because now we say peace abroad, but also peace at home. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
our national headquarters has been in St. Louis. And if you recall, it was that 4 or 5 years ago, we had these disturbances in Ferguson, Missouri.
Yeah.
And our executive vice president was a very nice African American man at that time. And I think he went up and got involved in some of that. And so we had a little conversation in our group about, well, we're only, against foreign wars or whatever, but right
Mm-hmm.
now we are involved in social movements within our country as well.
Right. Yeah, that whole the foreign and domestic enemies. I think that's really powerful, and and it's important to stay involved with the things that are going on within our country as well too. So I appreciate that too.
Yeah, I was a national chairman of a working group on PTSD. So I read
Mm.
about 15 books. But I was in a supply depot in Da Nang, and although we got some bullets over our barracks in the middle of the night. So, but I never did see combat, so I couldn't really imagine much about it. So I read all these books, but then I realized I need to get to meet some of the population, to understand, to meet some of these people. So I started attending a support group here in Tacoma called Point Man, and great bunch of guys. But it's funny because they are my exact opposite. They're pro-military Christian guys. I should say guys. There's some women involved in the group.
Mm.
Uh, so I kind of waltzed in there and said, oh, by the way, I'm your neighborhood peacenik, and I'm here to see what I can find out. And it
Yeah.
was funny, after about a month, we had Yell at Dave night, and everybody told their stories about coming home from Vietnam and getting spit on and all this
Mm.
other stuff, which I didn't argue. And I realized I was just an icon of all
Mm.
these, hatreds and, misunderstandings they had. You probably heard of Jane Fonda went to North Vietnam and all this other
Mm.
stuff. And so, but what happened? Vietnam was the first televised war. In World War II,
Mm.
there were newsreels and things like that. But in Vietnam, you actually saw American soldiers killing people.
Mm.
And so a lot of the peace community said, oh, look at those terrible American soldiers. And we hate American soldiers and this, that, and the other. So there was a lot of misunderstanding in the peace community. But since then, we've realized that was a terrible mistake and we shouldn't have done anything to the returning soldiers.
Right.
Our dispute is with the administration, with the people that make the decisions, maybe
Mm.
the commanding officer or whatever, but not the grunt, not the soldier or even like the first lieutenant. They're all doing their best. And as long as they're obeying orders and doing what they're supposed to do, I have no quarrel with any of them. But and I think hopefully we've transitioned. But the funny thing is, like I said, I started attending this group, and after a while, they realized that I was a normal guy and I was cared about people as much as they did. And they
Mm.
realized that I wasn't Jane Fonda or anything else like that. And so I've become friends with a lot of them. I'm still attending this group 10 years later, every
Mm.
Tuesday morning at the MBITS Hall here in Tacoma, because we all realize there's things to do. And I also told them I want to help build a bridge between
Yeah.
liberals and conservatives and the peaceniks and the warhawks or whatever, because
Mm-hmm.
we've got to heal this country.
Right. And I think that's part of, just having that conversation and learning from our different perspectives and our different experiences, and seeing, where we can connect and where we can relate to each other, because there's always somewhere that we can relate, something that we can understand and communicate with. So,
Yeah,
and I think that is
and I'd say we're all complicated.
mm,
We all think of simple stereotypes, but all liberals are not identical.
mm,
It's the thing to be is against Israel and for Palestine, but I feel, that both sides have to sit down at the table and they have to find peace together. You can't just say Israel is terrible and that's the end of it. And I have an acquaintance, well, speaking of cats, uh, that's down in Portland. Portland, Oregon has a pretty active chapter of Veterans for Peace. And he's been involved in the demonstrations at Portland. I'm sure you've heard of them, been going on for 100 days or so.
oh
Uh,
yeah.
I read an excellent book called Better Angels of Our Nature, and it's about the decrease of war and violence over time, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people because all we ever see on TV is the bad news. I'm
Hmm.
getting headbutted here. I'm sure you've heard the expression, when it bleeds, it leads. So all you know
Mm,
is watching TV is the world's going to hell. And
right.
there's automobile accidents and people getting killed, and there's rioting and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But I've been communicating this guy that we have to have police. We have to have authority figures that maintain order. We
Right.
had our little exclusion zone up in Seattle for a while that, that was everybody's ideal. We don't need the police. We'll take care of ourselves. And who needs the police? And so I think 3 or 4 people got shot. A couple of them died. I understand maybe been some rapes. Some people got things getting stolen, and they realized, oh, maybe this isn't heaven after all, and the police had to come back in. But
Yeah.
so I think there's misunderstandings because a lot of people are playing this out because terrible things have happened to blacks and people of color. The George Floyd thing this summer, and the lady,
Manuel.
yeah,
Um,
Breonna Taylor. Um, there's obvious problems of imprisonment and education, a lot of problems, but it's not blacks versus police that we have
right.
to defeat the police to help the blacks. No, because we need black police or police patrolling black areas as well to reduce crime and things in that area.
So I wanted to kind of mention a little bit about, uh, like you said, about how the veterans from Vietnam were kind of misunderstood as far as, following orders, and
Yeah.
um, um, uh, for like the the National Guard in Missouri, and how some of those troops are actually reaching out to Veterans for Peace for advice and how to kind of challenge unlawful orders, or orders that they're quite kind of questioning as far as um, bringing violence to peaceful protesters. And how do you respond, or what would be your advice to active members that are still kind of, struggling and conflicting, or having that conflict internally?
Yeah, yeah, those are difficult questions. And the thing is, because it's military culture and military law, um, I don't know if you want to talk to um, your judge advocate general, your J Corps, your military. Um, they're very familiar with military law. Of course, they're in the inside. I don't know if you want to go to an outside lawyer. Sometimes some of them have expertise in military affairs. Uh, uh, Pastor or yeah, chaplain
Mm.
of your unit,
Yeah, those different
maybe.
resources, I think. So yeah, and it's always going to be some kind of it's going to be an issue, and I agree. So I think for Veterans for Peace, it's a national organization, and they have chapters all over the world, and there's many opportunities to take actions. And what are some other um, issues that you have been involved in with Veterans for Peace?
Well, most of what we do in a normal course of affairs, if we don't have virus going on, is
Mm.
we reach out to the public at a lot of community events. There's a couple of Martin Luther King Jr. events in January. But as summer rolls around, we go over to Meeker Days in Puyallup. A lot of you are probably familiar with that. It's a lot of fun there's like a big fair over a 3-day weekend. But we have a table there and we'll have material to hand out and answer questions. Uh, but occasionally we'll run into people who have never heard of our organization and we'll ask intelligent questions and we'll try to give them a straight answer of what we're doing. Um,
Mhm.
and Stillicum, they have the apple squeeze in the fall, and as of course, a huge
Oh, cool.
military community down that way, a lot of retirees. But we've had good conversations with people there.
Mhm.
And normally in the Puyallup Fair, which unfortunately was canceled this year, but we get a 4-day run they call the Free Speech Zone. So they give us a booth for 4 days, and we just have to pay our admission ticket. But it's a great opportunity to talk to people. So talk to people about our organization, about peace in general, and answer any questions they have. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. So do you know how the organization was founded, or a little bit of the history?
Ah, that's a good question, Laura, because it's interesting. There was a documentary. I forget the guy's name that made it. But anyway, a couple of years ago on Vietnam, and it showed a parade in the 70s towards the end of the war, and they had this huge banner that said "Veterans for Peace." But that was
Mm.
not our organization. That was just a natural slogan, and it was on a banner. But our organization was actually formed in the mid 80s, in the height of the Iran-Contra affair during the Reagan administration,
Mm.
when there was things about we're dealing with Iran and we're getting involved in Central America. Uh, his first chapter was in Maine. And it's interesting, there's a chapter in Eastern Washington, I think it's like chapter 5 or 6 or something like that, was very early. We're numbered sequentially. As
Mm.
I was saying, Portland is 72, Seattle is 92. That's our big chapters around here. Tacoma's 109. We're 134. We were organized just about 10 years ago. There's one up in Bellingham, and Spokane has a very active chapter.
Oh, nice.
But
Yeah,
we're
that's awesome.
But we're
Go ahead.
mostly on the coast, California, like I said, Oregon, but New York, but not a lot in the middle part of the country where there's more conservative point of view. We have a few members here and there, but not any big chapters.
Mhm. So, do you have a veterans? Do you have a veteran role model that inspires you?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. It's funny. I love the movie Patton. Of course, that came out
Mhm.
about 30 years ago or so. Uh, and he was obviously a great leader, and was a very deep man. I think you were in Egypt or whatever, and you were saying the battle was over. They said, "No, General, the battle was over here." I said, "No, I'm talking about 1,000 years ago. There was a battle over here." And he had his dual ivory handled pistols in his belt. Uh, Now he had trouble because he was trying to slap around a soldier that had PTSD, and although he didn't call it that in those days, and so he kind of got in trouble and was kind of lost favor after that.
Mm.
But we've had some great soldiers. Um, I come from Kansas, and of course we claimed Dwight David Eisenhower, who was one of the commanding
Mm.
generals in World War II. Actually born in Texas, but grew up in Kansas. But I can't remember who's the general that Truman had to do the reconstruction of Europe.
Oh, right,
But
right.
a lot of the Europe or the World War II generals were great. Were dealing with soldiers. Were not aloof in the lead or whatever. They really treated the soldiers well and tried to do the best they could, even though it's war's of course a terrible thing.
Right. And I
And
think that's
and I will have to say in the Navy, now that you mentioned, I have to remember Rear Admiral Zumwalt. allowed us to grow beards when we were out at sea. It was quite something. He was really radical. You let him do that, those sailors will do anything. And of course, the funny thing is, I've got a full beard now, but I tried to grow one time. We went out to sea, and it was scraggly and terrible and looked like heck. But anyway, now that you mention it, he does come to man. He was a very good man.
Right. It does make a difference, those leaders that actually, they do inspire you when they take care of the troops, and I think that's really something that you remember about your leadership in your military experience, and the ones that actually, yeah, like you said, that might be a little bit radical or might have a little some unpopular opinions, but they're they're memorable, right? So that's awesome. Yeah, for me, I'm really inspired by the first female Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Joanne Bass, and she's very active on social media, so she connects with the troops on social media, and stays involved in leadership and things like that. So.
And of course, I have to mention our project that you've gotten involved with, that, we said we realized we can't go out in crowds anymore, but we realized we can hold a banner over the freeway. And we've done that in the past a lot, but we decided to do that this summer. And well, it's interesting. In the spring, we actually were holding one uh, against going to war with Iran and Venezuela, because there was war talk back in the spring. So we had
Yeah.
a banner with that on it for a while. But then after the George Floyd event, we made one that says Black Lives Matter across the top and Veterans for Peace on the bottom. And we've since added one the last month that says End Systemic Racism. So in fact, a couple of weeks ago, we held up both banners at the same time over by the Tacoma Dome on the bridge that's McKinley Street on one end and D Street on the other end. So I don't know what bridge it is, but oftentimes I-5 traffic is nice and slow, so everybody gets a chance to read it. So yeah, some interesting experiences. I hold up banners or signs by the street every once in a while, but a lot of times we give out a peace sign and we get a peace sign back, and sometimes just half a peace sign, but that's okay.
Yeah, I know, right? But I think that's like you said, in the pandemic, we have those opportunities to still stay involved, and being outdoors, we still practice the social distancing and the safety precautions, wearing masks. But it's easy activism. I think it's something, we're providing that awareness, keeping that conversation going, and being out there, being seen. I think that's very important as well too, for
Yeah,
organizations.
good to do, and it's good for organization to have something to do, because that's a bad thing. When the virus hit this spring, we kind of thought, well, we have to strike our tent and just roll it up and put it away for a few years. But so we're glad that we're still doing a few things, um, because a lot of people say, well, what does your organization do anyway? So yeah, it is good to because if you're doing something, then people want to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And it's funny, even a lot of my military friends say, well, we're all for peace. So, I think we kind of just discuss how to go about it. But,
Mm.
and the other thing I
Yeah.
would say to, because a lot of you folks are returning, find ways to get involved, find ways
Mm-hmm.
to give back to your community. Because the thing is, when you network, you'll find opportunities, you'll meet interesting people, and maybe figure out something you want to do.
Right. Yeah, that's I've found that to be very eye-opening as well too. So there's so many different organizations, different opportunities. There's always something going on
Oh,
in the
yeah.
community. So, and even just showing up, I think that's part of that's half the battle. Just going and meeting somebody, meeting someone new, and learning about what you can get involved in. So.
I was kind of thinking about it in preparation for this, talking to you folks. But yeah, the military is always somebody telling you what to do. And you
Hmm.
get this, that, and the other. We're pretty regimented, wear our uniforms. But I would say, it's kind of like we called it shore leave in the Navy. I don't know if you call it, your Liberty Call, or you're going to town. When you're on your own, you can do anything. So that's the thing, is figure out, what you want to do, and figure out who you are, because a lot of times that's a pretty good question, and
Right.
what you want to get involved with.
Right. And that's part of what we do as well with the Redefining Your Future, is encouraging and supporting people that are, supporting service women and spouses while they're transitioning and trying to figure out, what's our next mission going to be, and that's such a powerful um, piece to be in, because there's sometimes it can be overwhelming. For myself, I just retired a couple of years ago, and I'm going back to school, but then there's also some things that I want to do, but I'm just kind of not sure how to get involved or how to start. But it's always, there's different ways to get involved and try new opportunities.
Yeah, and after somebody's been overseas for a long time, or 9 months or a year, whatever, come back home, and the other spouse have been been ruling the house for a while, and then who's in charge here? It's good to learn communications again, and
Yeah.
I would recommend journaling, and also maybe writing letters to each other, maybe once a week or whatever. As I said, I've been involved in the divorce recovery group, and I don't recommend that to anybody. And
Mm.
so try to work on your relationships, within a marriage, or even, your friendships or whatever, because that's a key to success and happiness.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. I think that's a lot of times. My husband was also active duty, so yeah, having more time with each other at home and with the kids was pretty pretty different from what we were used to for 20 years, and
Yeah.
and then yeah, having to get to know each other again was it's
Mm.
it's a challenge. It's a process.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important, and I think that's also, like you said, getting involved in and doing volunteer work, and just kind of, there's so many veterans opportunities and organizations out there. So
Yeah.
um,
Because there's always people looking for volunteers. There's always
mhm,
need a spare pair of hands.
exactly, that's true. So how I know veterans this year the Veterans Parade has been canceled, but in past years, how was the experience with Veterans for Peace participating in the Veterans Parades?
You see a petition in the Veterans Parade?
I know for like last year, did you guys participate in the Veterans Parade, or in years past? How was that?
Yeah, I'm still not hearing yet. Something about veterans, but is it resource fair or the parade or what?
The Auburn Veterans
Oh,
Parade.
yeah. Yeah, the parade, and the yeah, Veterans Day. And yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we've been doing that 7 or 8 years. Um, and it's very interesting because, yeah, there's, like I said, I call it a misunderstanding, but there's a lot of folks get their ego bruised a little bit about all these peaceniks, and get them out of here. What are they doing here? Since they hate our country, and what are they doing? And uh,
Hmm.
so I know some of the Vietnam groups have turned their backs to us, and this, that, and the other. Uh, but it's interesting. We've been given a warmer response every year. And a
Hmm.
lot of times people will cheer, like say, give us the peace sign back and all that stuff. Uh, it's been a great experience. Um, and we've developed it into the point we normally have a lunch afterwards, and sometimes we'll have a speaker or not. And usually, Seattle is normally the organizing chapter, but like I said, some of the folks from here in Tacoma, some folks from Olympia. Used to be we'd have some people come up from Portland, and maybe even Bellingham. In fact, usually we have folks come over from Spokane every last several years. So it's kind of a regional get together. So it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, it's like I said, I wave at my friends in my Point Man group, because I normally see them going by after we get out of the parade. So yeah, it's a fun experience. Oh, and
Hmm.
naturally they have a Huey helicopter fly over, and
Oh.
folks know about triggering. It said, oh, I'm back in Vietnam. It's just amazing just to say the womp, 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 womp. Every Vietnam veteran gets it.
Yeah, last year my daughter participated. She was in the ROTC for her high school, and so just kind of seeing her in uniform and marching in the parade, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's pretty inspiring and pretty powerful. Um,
Yeah, it is
but yeah,
interesting, all the different units, because I
right.
know one of our past presidents was from Filipino extraction, was more in Desert Storm One. I forget the name, but he was kind of not quite as old as most of us Vietnam fogies. But
Mhm.
there was a Philippine group. But yeah, there was active military there, veterans groups from Vietnam, and yeah, it's a fun parade. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's so sad that we have to cancel this year. Hopefully next year. Hopefully next year we'll be back to normal anyway.
Right. Uh-huh.
So, so yeah, some of the so Veterans for Peace has like three main program areas for educating the public on the true cost of war and militarism, and also leading by example and to uh, working to end the current wars and change U.S. foreign policy uh, from war to diplomacy, and
Hmm.
then healing wounds of war and build a just and peaceful society. And I think that's one of the big ones is recognizing, the PTSD and the wounded warriors, things like that. I think that's
Yeah, we've got a working group interested in VA affairs, and one of the big
mm,
issues is opposing privatization of the VA.
mm,
It's a big question now because we know we've got a lot of veterans in rural areas, and we can't have a VA hospital in every small town.
right,
So
right.
this veterans choice thing has come about, I understand, and that's probably necessary.
Mm,
But we're our healthcare for our whole population is a question right now we're talking about. So I
right.
don't know if it's something that may get blended all together at some point or not. But
Right.
yeah, but the veterans homelessness, the PTSD, military sexual trauma,
Right.
suicide, a lot of those I call invisible wounds of war. In fact, there was
Right.
a great documentary called The Invisible War about military sexual trauma about 10
Yeah.
years ago. But yeah, it's a lot of things that people aren't aware of because you see a veteran standing there, if, guy's lost his leg or whatever in his wheelchair, well, it's pretty obvious they can't do much. But somebody
Mm,
could be standing there and say, well, why don't you just get a job? And they don't realize that a lot of people can't hold a job anymore. They have
mm,
triggers and they have things going on. So it's a sad affair. And especially, I mean, I think we still have homeless from Vietnam. And that's
mm,
in the richest country in the world. To me, that there's no excuse for this. But
right.
that's another, like I said, this virus, I think, is bringing up a lot of questions that need
Mm-hmm.
answers. So I don't know how we're going to proceed, but um, that's a big concern for me for a lot of these invisible wounds.
Yeah. I think that's yeah, the big issue is taking care of what there's so many issues, and so just having getting involved in something makes a big difference. And so I think that's Veterans for Peace has a lot of different programs and a lot of different opportunities for people to get involved. And you don't have to necessarily be a veteran, but just to support and spouses or family members
Yeah,
and just
we
get
have
involved.
associate members. Anyone that supports our organization can join it.
Mm-hmm.
Although, of course, we do, value our veteran members, which I'm a veteran member, obviously. But anyone that wants to support us can join and take part. It's interesting. We have a chapter in Vietnam that's active in building schools, and I think they're trying to find landmines and unexploded ordnance. I think these little orange balls or whatever that didn't
Right.
explode, and little kids will dig them up, and they may explode and injure or kill a Vietnamese kid. Um,
Wow.
and so things like that, yeah, there's a lot of different projects going on.
Right. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your experience and your story and learning about Veterans for Peace. So this was a good conversation.
Thank you so much, Laura. And obviously, you can find Veterans for Peace online. And we have obviously a website. And on that website, you can find our working groups, but you can also find the local chapters. And so, if
Mhm.
you're interested or you know someone else, uh, we would like to, invite them to investigate us and check us out. And thank you very much for your time for all of you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Dittemore. It's great to have you on. All right.
Peace sign. Peace
Um,
sign.
all right. Peace.